2:24, 13-35 from the Message. That same day, two of them were walking to the village, Emmaus, about 7 miles out of Jerusalem. They were in deep conversation, going over all these things that had happened. In the middle of their talk and questions, Jesus came up and walked along with them. But they were not able to recognize who he was. He asked, "What's this you're discussing so intently as you walk along?" They just stood there, long-faced, like they had lost their best friend. Then one of them, his name was Cleopas, said, "Are you the only one in Jerusalem who hasn't heard what's happening during these last few days?" He said, "What has happened?" They said, "The things that happened to Jesus the Nazarene. He was a man of God, a prophet, dynamic in work and word, blessed by both God and all the people. Then our high priests and leaders betrayed him, got him sentenced to death, and crucified him. And we had our hopes up that he was the one about to deliver Israel. And it is now the 3rd day since it happened. But now some of our women have completely confused us. Early this morning, they were at the tomb and couldn't find the body. They came back with a story that they had seen a vision of angels who had said he was alive. Some of our friends went off to the tomb to check and found it was empty, just as the women said, but they didn't see Jesus." Then he said to them, "So thick-headed, so slow-hearted, why can't you simply believe all that the prophets said? Don't you see that these things had to happen, that the Messiah had to suffer, and only then enter into his glory?" Then he started at the beginning, with the book of Moses, and went on through all the prophets, pointing out everything in the scriptures that referred to him. They came to the edge of the village where they were headed. He acted as if he were going on, but they pressed him. "Stay and have supper with us. It is nearly evening, the day is done." So he went in with them, and here is what happened. He sat down at the table with them. Taking the bread, he blessed and broke and gave it to them. At that moment, open-eyed, wide-eyed, they recognized him. And then he disappeared. Back and forth they talked. Didn't we feel on fire as he conversed with us on the road, as he opened up the scriptures for us? They didn't waste a minute. They were up and on their way back to Jerusalem. They found the 11 and their friends gathered together, talking away. It's really happened. The Master has been raised up. Simon saw him. Then the two went over everything that happened on the road and how they recognized him when he broke the bread.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I want to find a person down on a C-train station someplace in flip-flops. They're there, right? You'll find them for sure. I love that person. I'm not that person, but I love that person. They declared 3 weeks ago, it's spring. And they have on shorts and a tank top. Don't you love it? Oh yeah, I'm closer to my grandkids who are saying, "Snow in the backyard. Where's my snowsuit?" I love that too. Yeah, I'm just not that. So it's the morning after surgery. Been there? It's the morning after the funeral. It's the morning after the first night alone in the coffin. And you're saying to yourself, what was that all about? Do you know the feeling? Like, I've just gone through or down a road I didn't particularly want to be on. It's a road more traveled. I wish it had been less traveled, but I'm on it. Who am I now? What were those feelings about? Was there any point to this? Am I supposed to be getting a message? Should I learn something? Because I'm not. I'm just here. And I'm on this road. Is there an exit sign somewhere? Yeah. Hence the title, The Road More or Less Traveled. Because we got in this story 2 people who are on it, who have been to Jerusalem, probably Jesus followers, and they've been there for the Passover, and we've had, like, the crucifixion. What was that all about? I love the way this story is told. 2 guys, or 2 girls, who knows who these people are. One of them is called Cleopas, and the other is, what's her name? Okay, this isn't Peter, James, and John here. In other words, you can put my name in there, and we're kind of going home like this. What was that all about? Really, seriously. 2 of them walking to the village of Emmaus, 7 miles. They're probably walking in company, because you don't walk, even the 2 of you, alone. Out of town. There are no highways here. There are a lot of bandits. So you make sure you're in company. And they're just talking over this stuff. And this has to have happened, you know. In the middle of their talk and their questions about all this stuff that's happened, Jesus came up and walked along with them. Seriously? He's there. Talking about Jesus resurrected from the dead. He's there, he's walking along with them, and he just sort of puts on a little sprint and walks beside them. But they were not able to recognize who he was. And I don't know when they do this, because they don't tell you why they can't. You can say anything you want from God, cloak their eyes. Dude, they're so brokenhearted, they're so focused, they're so concentrated, or who knows? Confused. They don't recognize anything or anybody. It's just another bloke in the road. Now, me, I'm thinking to myself, oh, I would recognize him right away. I would have stopped the whole thing and said, you've been here all along, Jesus? Stay right there. I'm getting my camera. You're going to be on YouTube in 5 minutes. Enough of this stuff. And it's not happening, is it? Because this is a story written and included by Luke specifically for all the people out there like me who are going to, as Jesus himself said, not see and still believe. Never see and still believe. One of the things you got to realize when you hear this story is it's about certain people here in time, but it's written for people here in time, probably at least 60 years later, who have no possibility of ever seeing the resurrected Jesus or the living Jesus of Nazareth or anything else, and will only believe is what they hear. So where does Jesus show up and all that for those people? Well, they got my interest as out of them. Mr. So-and-so in here. And he asked, said Jesus, as we're just sort of walking along here, what's this you're discussing so intently as you walk along? Like you didn't know. This is a good counselor question. Tell me about it. Okay, what's in your mind? And they just stood there long-faced like they'd lost their best friend. And then one of them, his name was Cleopas, said, are you the only one in Jerusalem who hasn't heard what's happening during the last few days? Which I'm sure he said, I can't believe I said that. A little while later, you know. As though the consuming questions of those events stopped life right there. They have a habit of doing that, don't they? You ever seen a life stop because somebody else's life stopped? You ever seen somebody who just can't go forward because of stuff that happened? And everybody's saying, well, exactly what are you supposed to do? We hoped for certain things. Jesus, the Nazarene, he was there. We heard him. Got our hearts. He was a man of God. Check. He was a prophet. Check. Dynamic in word and deed. Check. Blessed by both God and all the people. Check. That's Messiah language. We're just running down the list. He was the one. We were looking for him. And we were ready for him. And then our high priests and leaders betrayed him. And I love the hour in there because it sort of says we did it to ourselves. So what, and you get that too, don't you? I'm stuck here. And I did it to myself. And the blame starts, and the what ifs start, and all the rest of that stuff. They betrayed him, got him sentenced to death, and crucified him. Check. We had our hopes up. There it is. We had our hopes up that he was the one about to deliver Israel and bring the kingdom to Israel again. And it's now the third day since it happened, which is a way of saying the clock is ticking. With every tick of the clock, everything else moves on but us. Here we are. But now, some of our women have completely confused us. How many comments at this point? But let me note that if that's true, that Jesus Christ used women for precisely that purpose. Okay? Jesus did it, it's right? Okay, so, no comments. Early this morning, they were at the tomb and couldn't find his body. They came back with a story that they had seen a vision of angels who said he was alive. All of this stuff is found in the record. Some of our friends went off to the tomb to check and found it empty, just as the women said, but they didn't see Jesus. Have you noticed this story? Nobody can. Michael has pointed this out a number of times. I appreciate it every time, Michael. You can have the living, resurrected Son of God standing in front of your face, staring right at him, and not say a thing. If it were a matter of what the physical eyes could see, we're hopeless. In this case, that's not how he reveals himself. You can thunder about proof of this all you want. But on the day in which the proof is standing in front of people, no. There's something about the stories of the resurrections of Jesus Christ that require people to enter a new understanding of who he is, or they'll never see him. And that will mean a new understanding of who they are and what's happened to them. Maybe that's the deal. Because you got to let go of the story to let another one come. Well, here's the story so far. Then he said, so thick-headed, so slow-hearted. And I went to this point where I said, come on. You know we don't get it. But this is code language. It runs through the Old Testament as well. It's a way of saying you don't just get this by thinking or sitting or reading a book or looking at something or conducting an experiment. This is revelation. You have to be shown something. So thick-headed, so slow-hearted. Why can't you simply believe all that the prophets said? They just finished ticking off a whole lot that the prophets had said. But now what I have here is the Master telling me that I need another Bible study. Seriously? Which is absolutely true. In fact, what we're going to need is a complete comprehensive Bible study. The early church had to reread the entire Old Testament and say, he told us we'd find him there. Okay, let's have a look. Don't you see that these things had to happen? Had to happen. That the Messiah had to suffer. And only then enter into his glory. There's the hinge of the whole thing. that the Messiah had to suffer. That the suffering of the Messiah seems to have been a profound error and a tragedy was their understanding that it was foretold by God and essential to his very nature. Oh, that part I don't get. That part I don't get. You know, studying theology and studying it from a conservative standpoint, I heard about the liberals. How many of you heard about the liberals? I almost heard about the liberals, I'm sure. The liberals in the 19th century, when they heard about the cross of Jesus Christ, were famous for saying, we do not follow a butcher shop religion based on shed blood. So we believe in the Jesus who is a good moral teacher, and he will guide us. Now, how many of you have heard of the fundamentalists? Now, more of you have heard of them. They say, what? Are you kidding? No, there's a cross, and there is shed blood, and if you don't believe that, you're out. And, you know, I was taught on the fundamentalist side, and I came to realize something at the end of things. That the cross and the shed blood and all the rest of that stuff came along with this principle. Thank God all that dying is over. You get through Good Friday as fast as you can, and you say, thank you, Jesus, for doing all the dying, so now we can have all the benefits. End of story. You know what that is? Essentially the same net effect as the liberal position. No cross, no blood, no pain, just me in heaven. Away we go. Then I read the Bible. Oops. Like Jesus said, it said to me things like in Philippians, part does look like excursus, but I really like this. It has been granted unto you to share in his suffering. I could just almost see the tagline on the end of it. First 6 months free. Run that by me again. What did I just sign up for here? You know, I hate this. It's like getting a new cell phone contract over the phone. I can't remember what they said. Okay? I signed up for Jesus. What did I get? Oh, you got a piece of his suffering. Number one, I thought the suffering was over. Apparently not. I know I'm being cryptic here, folks. But it's a way of not being angry. Apparently not. The entire New Testament read to me. Number one, no suffering, no Messiah. And that was not an aberration, it was of his nature. It was his suffering that made him the Messiah. Obedient unto death, even the death of the cross. No death, no suffering, no Messiah, no salvation. Thanks for playing. Number two, it ain't over. John the Revelator looks in the book of Revelation into heaven, where Christ stands before the Father. What does he see? I always love this. We say, I want to see you high and lifted up. Do you think anybody has any idea what lifted up in the Bible means? It means the cross. No gold, no jewels, no fancy robes, no lights, action, camera, no YouTube. It means the cross. I want to see you on the cross. Do you really? Oh man. That's what it means. It was that that made him. It is that which is the instrument of his current rule, and the whole creation suffers at this moment, groaning for the new thing that he's going to bring to pass. We groan for the redemption of our bodies, and if I'm a Christian, I've got a piece of that action, and I cannot live as a Christian without the suffering of Jesus Christ inherent in my life. David didn't tell me that. I would have thought twice about signing my name in the back of the Gideon Bible. Except if I read it first. Pardon me. The Messiah had to suffer and then enter into his glory. And he hasn't entered it yet. So thick-headed. So slow-hearted. Why? Because I don't want that piece of the action. And I'll do anything to create a religion that cuts it out. John Smith was present with us at Ambrose a while ago, and he attended the service here. He teaches pastoral theology, University of Aberdeen in Scotland, Church of Scotland minister. He's written a wonderful book called Raging with Compassion, in which he talks about the fact that this just goes straight through me like a knife, that ours is the first and only age on the planet, our age, that has made suffering and evil. So we talk about if suffering happens. We have all kinds of philosophical questions about why do good things happen, bad things happen to good people. Sorry. I put that understanding, which is almost a 20th century understanding, up against the early church. I did a course in worship at Ambrose. I get students together in teams. They put on historic worship services. I gave one team, the early church, put on a worship service that gives Ambrose, assembled for worship, an experience of the early church's worship. One guy had to do a sermon. I said, what should I do? I said, read their sermons. He read their sermons. He came back and said, I got a problem. What's the problem? I said, every last one of the sermons preached in the church that I can find for the early church is talking to a congregation about how to handle this week's suffering. I don't think I could make that fly at Ambrose where everybody's mad if they suffer and wonder why God doesn't get on the job. You get it? Do you get it? Until this penetrates my heart, God in His service in the world, in His mission in the world, and Jesus Christ, His only Son, shaped by the suffering of God, participating in the suffering of God, is there, and I'm over here complaining. Until I get it, until they got it, they won't get it. Well, after all of this, after he's gone through the prophets, I wish I had this Bible study outline, and all the scriptures pointing out that all of this is true. They came to the edge of the village where they were headed. They acted as if he was going on, and they pressed him, stay and have supper with us, which is a good hospitable thing to do. It's nearly evening, the day is done, so he went in with them. And it almost seems to be saying to us in the story, if you're still with us, ask Jesus to hang around, because he's fully prepared to keep on going beyond the people who want to hear about the suffering. And here is what happened. He sat down at the table with them. Taking the bread, he blessed, he broke, and gave it to them. Sound familiar? He sat down, he took the bread, he blessed it, he broke it, and he gave it to them. Yeah, that's the Lord's table language. These people had not been there for that meal, but the sequence was known to the people who read this book. And at that moment, open-eyed, wide-eyed, they recognized him. And then he disappeared. At the end of this, after they said, didn't we feel on fire as he conversed with us in the road and opened up the scriptures for us? Yes. And when they go back, didn't we recognize him when he broke the bread with us? Yeah, we did. And they let it be known. I think Luke is trying to tell us, stay with the community, stay around the table, but understand this, when you're around that table, you show forth the Lord's death until he comes. You show forth that this Lord is a suffering Lord who is engaged in what's going on in the world. Not up in heaven sitting there saying, I did my job, you do yours. And if you really want to know him, don't avoid the pain. I'll give you two illustrations and then I've got to go. Number one, a man who was a good friend of another man, a prophet of mine, who committed suicide because he was afraid of the pain of that cancer. Shattered a whole lot of lives by what he did. John got back cancer. John was not a man to say a whole lot of stuff. He was in the same congregation, and we took a look at it and said, oh no, here we go again. And John asked the elders to come and pray for him, and the elders thought he wanted healing. And he said, no, I want the grace to die well. Wow. If they'd ever prayed that way. We prayed for the grace to die well. Make a long story short, I remember John sitting with his daughter, knowing full well that he had a sentence of death upon him, and it was not going to be an easy death. At a communion table with her, receiving communion in the church service. I remember singing over him in a hospital at 1 o'clock in the morning with an elder as he passed unconsciousness, and death slowly took him. And I remember that he healed up the wounds of his friend who had committed suicide in that congregation. He healed him up through the suffering because he refused to take his hands off or ask God to stay his hand. And he cured hundreds in the process. Don't tell me suffering isn't part of what God uses. Don't tell me God doesn't understand suffering, and don't tell me all the dying's over. But the living is the real story. One other illustration and I'm done. Because of the nature of the church in which I serve, some immigrants it's quite common for them to come, or guests from other nations. One particular case, a number of pastors from another nation, I believe it's an African nation, came to visit Canada. They're all married men. They all have big families. They're all here by themselves. We took them out for dinner. Took them to a restaurant. And, you know, it's like when you're served in a restaurant here in Calgary. Remember, we used to have plates. Now we have platters. You know? Oh, man, here it is. And we were not prepared for them looking down at this, realizing that that food would feed their family for a week. They said, we cannot eat this. We pushed it away. We cannot eat ourselves into pain, knowing that they will not eat. We are bound to them. We're separated by miles, but our hearts are bound to them. We cannot do this. I thought about that. I've thought about it ever since. All over the earth, God is engaged in a struggle. St. Paul calls it a bring to birth, childbirth, a new world. You know, if God were the God we always like to talk about philosophically, they just went, magic wand, new heaven and new earth, good. That is not the God whom Jesus Christ called Father. You can close that God up in your philosophy book if you like and open it another day. But the God he called Father is engaged in human life in the unfolding narrative of things, and he has not escaped the struggle of the suffering. It has penetrated his very soul. He's there today, and the only question to be asked is whether we're bound to the suffering of God in the world so that we cry out for it, and if you like, we can't eat when others don't. Or whether we're saying, I'm glad all that's over. Such do we then. This is the road, more or less traveled.